Hello everyone, welcome to another session of Coding with RV. Today we are going to build a Spring sample web application and deploy it on AWS Elastic Beanstalk server. So to begin with, I would go to google.com and search for Spring Initializer. Spring Initializer is kind of a tool provided by Springboot, which lets us pick all the configurations that we want on our project. Like for project, let's use a build tool. You can use Maven or Gradle. I'll go with Maven today, and I'll be using Java. I'll leave the Springboot version as default one. And you can also provide your group ID, your artifact ID, the project name, and description over here. Let's start with group ID. I'll be using com.rv.code, and we are building a sample Spring web application. Okay, and here's the interesting thing over here, packaging. So once we are done with everything, we want to package our application. We could either use jar or a var kind of a packaging. Let's go with var, and the Java version I'll use 8. So this is about the basic configuration. Now let's move on to adding dependencies, the Springboot dependencies. We are building a web application, so I would go with Spring Web for sure, and also use time leaf. That's a template engine from Spring. Then I will have, for the later part of the tutorial, I'll have Spring Data JPA and H2. This is an inline database that you'll notice in the coming videos. So this is about the configuration that we have selected, and once we have made this selection, we can go ahead and click on generate. So once we generate, this goes to the download folder. Here you can see it's a zip file with all the configuration ready. I'll extract over here, copy it over to your workspace. That's where you would like to put all the code. And now we're done with everything. Let's go to Eclipse. Okay, we are at Eclipse, and I want to import the file, the project that we just created. So I'll say file, import, and I'll say Maven, an existing Maven project. Since we selected Maven as the build tool, route it to the location where you copied the code, and this is the file. And as you see, once we make the selection, Eclipse automatically detects that there is a pom.xml configuration file. Just click on finish. Okay. So here's the project. Let's start with our pom.xml file. So pom.xml is kind of a configuration file for our Maven build tool. So here's an interesting thing. If you look at here, the group ID, the artifact ID, the packaging stuff, and the description, everything that we have provided there in the Spring Initializer website is actually copied over here. And also if you look at the Java version, we're using Java version 8. And the dependencies. So whatever dependencies we have selected, the Springboot starter packages, like the Spring Data, Spring Starter for Time Leaf, the Spring Starter for Web, and the H2 database, they are all copied over here. So this is about the configuration file for Maven build tool. Let's look at the Java code. Okay, so since we are working on a Spring Boot application, I would like to introduce you to this annotation, the Spring Boot application annotation. This annotation is actually a group of annotations. Like if you're providing a Spring Boot application, you're actually saying the container, you're actually telling the Spring application that this is a Spring Boot application, and it also has enable auto configuration. Then there is the component scan annotation. Everything is defined using this single annotation over here. Component scan annotation, for record, like it's our way of telling Spring that okay, here is the package, here is the place where you have to look for your bean configurations or bean definitions. And this application over here, this class over here is actually the heart of your Spring Boot application. Like for any Java class, like main method is the starting point. So similarly for a Spring Boot application, this would be the starting point. There's another feature to this class. We'll come back to it later. And let's get started actually. So it's a Spring Boot web application. Let's create a Java class for Spring Web Controller. So what exactly is a web controller? Like when we are building an application in using an MVC framework, we want a controller to control all the requests that you receive from a client, and then based on the request and based on the controller method, you will generate a response, a proper response, and send it over to the client. So since this is a controller, let's use the controller annotation to inform Spring that it is a controller, and let's define a request mapping. A request mapping is something like you have a URL that you want to map it and define a controller method for that. So whenever you go into the web and you click on this URL, you want some response to be generated. Let's define a method, get hello mapper, and I'll use a return type as string. So what do you think over here? Like we are returning a string whenever someone hits the URL hello string world. Do you think we will be returning an hello string back to the browser? Actually not. Like this, since this is a Spring Boot application, what happens when you're returning a string is there is something called a view resolver that Spring Boot provides with an auto configuration. Like if it was not a Spring Boot, we would have to define it, but since it's a Spring Boot application, it takes care of all the configuration for that. So whenever you're saying hello and you're returning a string, what Spring Boot actually does is it goes to the resources folder, to the templates, and there it looks for a file with the same name. It could be an HTML file or a JSP file. It just looks for that. So if you're creating an hello.html file in the templates folder, and I'll just create a regular HTML file, h1, just say hello Spring, save it, and come back here. We don't need this. Okay, save it. So now the application is ready. Like we have the controller, we have the URL, and we have the view ready to be displayed. Now once everything is ready, we need to run the application. There are two ways to run the application. The first one is using a command line, Maven command, and the second one is this class. This class over here, if you just right click here, run as a Java application. What Spring Boot does is there is an embedded Tomcat server that Spring Boot has. So when you're just saying run as a Java application, it's actually running your entire application on Tomcat, the embedded Tomcat server, on a port number 8080. So let's look at the application. It says it's up and running. Let's go here. Let's go hello Springboard. There you go. Hello Spring. So all we did, or all we had to do, is like create our controller with controller method, define the URL, and define the view method, and return the view as a string. And we see the output over here. Now another thing we need to notice is we are using the port 8080 currently. But since we are going to deploy the application on AWS actually works with the server port 5000. So here in our application.properties file, we just need to make a small chain here, create server.port equal to 5000, save it, and let's launch the application again. So this time the application runs again on the same Tomcat server, but on a different port, that's 5000. Let's get back to the browser, see if this still works, the 8080 still works. I doubt that. Yes, it doesn't work. Just replace the port number with 5000, and there you see, you have the response. Now our application is ready, and we are ready to go to deploy it on AWS. So for that, we need to build our WAR file. In my case, I'm using a command prompt Maven plugin to. So I just need to go. From the command line with the I'm at the project path, and here the command to package things using Maven, it's mbm space package. And just in case if you don't want your test cases to be included, you could use the command d skip test. We don't have any test cases right now, but just in case if you want to exclude any tests, we can use this command. Click and enter, and you will have the packaging going on. Right, so it says build success, and it also says the gives the location where it is saving the WAR file. So it's in the target folder. Get back to Eclipse, refresh the target folder, and you see here is the WAR file. So now we are ready with the application. We have already packaged it into a WAR file. Now it's time to deploy it on AWS. Okay, the service we are looking for today is called Elastic Beanstalk. We could just go here, search for EBS or Elastic Beanstalk, and then you click on the application. So here we are at Elastic Beanstalk homepage, and all we need to do is create an application. Give our application a name. It's called sample Spring Web. Okay. Now the platform is Java. It's developed in Java. We got the recommended settings we're going to use. Application code. So we are not going to sample application. We're doing upload your code. And there are multiple ways you could upload your code. Like you could use the S3 bucket. But in our case, say we are uploading it from a local file. So select local file. Click on source. Route to the target folder. And pick the WAR file. That's already been prepared. Now here it takes a minute to upload the WAR file onto AWS. Okay, so if we look at here, like the file is uploaded successfully, and next we just need to click on create the application. See if this works. And there you go. So once we click on create the application, what happens here is the Beanstalk would actually launch an EC2 instance, which is a virtual machine on the AWS server. So if you remember, when we selected Java from the drop-down, it gave us an option about what platform we are going to use. So that's actually an EC2 instance and an actual virtual machine that Amazon would get ready for us and then deploy the application onto that. So as this says, like this may take a few minutes. It might take like 2 or 3 minutes for everything to get ready and set up and the application to be deployed on there. The thing we see here, the S3 bucket storage, is actually Amazon's storage bucket where all your code, all your WAR files or any images or anything you have storing on your application would actually be stored over here on an S3 bucket. So when you're launching an Elastic Beanstalk, it actually creates a version of an S3 bucket and attaches it to your environment. It would be a good practice if you're a free tier user of Amazon. If you're a free tier user, it would be a good practice to keep checking your S3 bucket just to make sure you're not using more than the allotted quota in the free tier. So as you see, like it took us like 4 minutes to get the instance deployment completely successful. Okay, looks like everything is ready, and don't worry about the health right now because we don't have any health checks, and it's just a sample application, so don't worry about this right now. And here, if you're looking at the URL over here, so this is the URL we need to use to make our calls. Just copy this, and here, if you remember the localhost application URL, just paste it over here. And now let's see. There you go. It works. Just in case you want to try it again on a fresh browser. There you go. The application works and it's been deployed on AWS and everything is up and running. Just another suggestion, like if you are in the free tier and you want to end things, terminate things, don't forget to terminate your environments. You can terminate your environments and then launch them again. And in future, if you have multiple deployments and you want to upload another WAR file, another version, here is the option, the upload and deploy. You can just click this, choose another file, and you can deploy another WAR file. Also, if you see this page here, the application versions page, this is actually, it takes you to the S3 bucket where all your versions, like if you're uploading like 3 versions, like you did one deployment today, one deployment tomorrow, and the one the day after, and you click on the application versions page, you'll have all the 3 WAR files there in the S3 bucket. So you might want to clean it up on a time-to-time basis if you're on a free version. And that's about it, guys. Thank you for watching the video, and see you guys again soon.